The day began like any other on set, but beneath the surface the air carried a tension that no one could ignore. Crew members moved briskly around, arranging props, adjusting lights, and checking scripts, yet every glance seemed to drift toward one pair of actors, Dylan Wang and Shen Yue. They had been in the same room countless times before, but this time was different. Dylan walked in quietly, his usual confident stride replaced by something softer, heavier. He spotted Shen Yue across the soundstage, her attention fixed on the script in her hands, as if the words on the page were the only thing keeping her anchored. Taking a deep breath, Dylan crossed the distance. Each step felt like it echoed in his chest. He stopped just a few feet away, unsure if he should speak. She did not look up. The director gave them a curious glance before calling for a short break, sensing the invisible wall between them. Shen Yue finally raised her eyes, but only for a moment. Her gaze slid past him as though he was nothing more than a shadow in the room. Dylan's voice came low, almost fragile. Shen, I am sorry. His words hung there suspended in the heavy air. No reaction. He tried again, his tone trembling. I mean it. I should have listened. I should have been there. Shen Yue remained still, her expression unreadable. The rustle of costumes, the hum of lighting rigs, and the distant chatter of the crew filled the silence. It was not anger in her eyes, but something more complicated, a mixture of hurt and resolve. She finally spoke, her voice steady, yet laced with something sharp. Dylan, we have a scene to film. Let us focus on that. Her dismissal hit harder than any public rejection could have. Dylan's shoulders dropped, as if the weight he had carried all this time had just doubled. He nodded faintly, stepping back, giving her the space she clearly wanted. The cameras rolled. The scene demanded closeness, a romantic tension between their characters, but behind every line, every glance, there was the ghost of what had just happened. Dylan delivered his lines perfectly, yet his eyes betrayed the ache he could not hide. Shen Yue responded flawlessly, never breaking character, but there was a steeliness to her tone that the script did not call for. Between takes, Dylan stood alone at the edge of the set, watching her laugh lightly with another co-star. It was not forced laughter, it was real, and it stung. He wanted to step in to reclaim even a sliver of the warmth they once shared, but each time he moved forward, he remembered the way she had looked past him moments ago. Later in the day, a sudden downpour outside caused delays. The crew scattered under tents, while Dylan found himself standing under the same canopy as Shen Yue. The rain created a wall around them, isolating them from the others. This was his chance. Shen, I know I cannot change the past, but I want to try. His voice was quiet, almost swallowed by the sound of rain. She did not answer. Instead, she looked out at the drenched streets, as if searching for something far beyond his reach. Hours later, as the day wrapped, the director complimented them on their incredible chemistry. The irony was not lost on Dylan. Their characters were falling in love on screen, while in reality the chasm between them only grew wider. As the crew packed up, Dylan lingered, watching Shen Yue walk toward her car without a glance back. The apology had been spoken, but forgiveness had not come, and as her figure disappeared into the distance, Dylan realized that some silences speak louder than any words ever could. Tomorrow they would be back on set, pretending to be people who adored each other, yet for Dylan the hardest part would be knowing that the woman standing across from him had once been more than a co-star, and that now she was just out of reach forever. The set was unusually quiet that afternoon, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Cameras stood still, crew members froze mid-step, and the usual laughter between takes had been replaced by a heavy silence that clung to every corner. Dylan stood near the center of the set, his script trembling slightly in his hand. His eyes, usually so steady, were fixed on Shen Yue as she adjusted her costume, her back turned to him. It had been weeks since they had last exchanged more than a few polite words, weeks of tension that seemed to grow thicker with every passing day. But now Dylan's resolve was set. He took a deep breath, his chest rising as if bracing for an invisible storm, and began walking toward her. Each step seemed to echo louder than the last, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. Shen Yue sensed him before she saw him. Her movements slowed, her shoulders stiffened, and though she did not turn, her hands gripped the edge of the table in front of her as if anchoring herself in place. The soft hum of the overhead lights filled the space between them, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Shen Yue, Dylan's voice broke the silence. It was low, almost fragile, carrying a weight that made even the makeup artist at the far end of the room glance up in surprise. She didn't answer, but he pressed on. I need to say this. Not for the cameras. Not for the crew. For you. The quiet swallowed his words for a beat, but then he continued, his voice steadier now. He spoke of the mistakes he had made, of the words he wished he could take back, and the moments he had let slip away because of his own stubborn pride. His eyes glistened as he recounted the day they first met, the nervous laughter they shared during their early scenes, the unspoken understanding that used to pass between them with nothing more than a glance. Crew members shifted uncomfortably, unsure if they were witnessing something too personal for them to hear. A few pretended to busy themselves with cables and props, but their ears were unmistakably tuned to every word. Shen Yue remained still, her gaze fixed on the script in her hands, though she had stopped reading long ago. Dylan's voice grew softer, the words more deliberate, as if he feared this might be the last time she would ever let him speak to her like this. He told her he was sorry for letting the distance grow, for not being the person she needed when the spotlight burned too bright and the pressure became too heavy. When he finally stopped, the silence returned, heavier now. All eyes turned to Shen Yue, waiting for her response. Slowly, she set the script down, her fingers lingering on the edges as if reluctant to let go. Then she turned, her expression unreadable. For a fleeting moment, it seemed she might say something. Her lips parted slightly, but instead of words, she drew in a quiet breath and began walking. She didn't look at him, didn't slow her pace, didn't even glance back as she passed him and headed toward the exit. The sound of her footsteps faded until all that remained was the echo in Dylan's mind. He stood there, rooted in place, his apology still hanging in the air like a fragile thread that had just been cut. Some of the crew exchanged uneasy glances. Others lowered their eyes as if trying to erase what they had just seen. The director finally cleared his throat and muttered something about resetting for the next scene, but even his voice sounded small against the weight of the moment. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the set walls. Dylan turned toward the doorway where she had disappeared, the faintest hint of determination replacing the sadness in his eyes. Whatever walls Shen Yue had built around herself, he knew this was not the end of his attempt to break through them. Not yet. Little did anyone know that Shen Yue's decision to walk away had nothing to do with anger alone. Somewhere deep in her heart, the words he had spoken had struck a chord she wasn't ready to face, not under the glaring eyes of the crew, not with cameras waiting to capture her every flicker of emotion. And while the day's filming eventually resumed, the air never quite returned to normal. The unspoken tension now carried something new, a spark, a question left unanswered, and a sense that the story between Dylan Wang and Shen Yue was far from over. The set had emptied out hours ago, yet Dylan was still there. He sat alone in the corner of the soundstage, the faint glow of a single overhead light casting long shadows across the floor. His script lay open in front of him, though his eyes weren't reading. He was replaying every second of what had happened that afternoon, every detail of Shen Yue's silence, every step she took away from him. The night air outside seeped through the slightly open door, carrying the faint scent of rain. He knew she hadn't left immediately after walking away. He had caught a glimpse of her earlier, standing alone near the trailers, her head tilted slightly upward as if searching the night sky for something only she could see. Now, the thought of letting another day pass without speaking to her gnawed at him. He stood, his footsteps echoing in the empty space, and pushed open the door. The night outside was quiet, but the light from one of the trailers was still on. He walked toward it, each step slower than the last, the crunch of gravel beneath his shoes sounding almost too loud. Inside the trailer, Shen Yue sat on the small sofa, still in her costume, her hair loosely falling over her shoulders. She was scrolling through her phone, but her gaze was distant, her mind clearly elsewhere. She didn't look up when Dylan stepped in. Shen Yue, his voice was quieter now, stripped of the rehearsed steadiness he had tried to hold on set. Please, just let me explain. She set her phone down slowly, her fingers resting on it for a moment before she leaned back. You already did, she said softly, her eyes fixed on the floor. No, Dylan shook his head, stepping closer. On set, I was speaking to you, but I was also speaking to the people around us. Now it's just you and me. She finally looked at him, her eyes unreadable. And What exactly do you think will change? He hesitated, but then sat down across from her. Everything, he said simply. Because I'm not asking for forgiveness so the crew can relax, or so the rumors can stop. I'm asking because I can't stand the way things are between us. I can't stand that I let it get this far. Her jaw tightened slightly, but she didn't interrupt. He took that as a sign to continue. I know I let my career, my pride, even my fears come before you. I thought I was protecting myself, but all I did was push you away. And when you needed me to fight for you, I stayed quiet. His voice faltered, and he leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. That's the thing I regret most. Shen Yue's expression softened for a moment, almost imperceptibly, but she quickly looked away. You think words can fix this? She asked. No, he admitted. I think time can, but only if you let me try. The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by the faint hum of the trailer's lights. Shen Yue finally stood, walking past him toward the door. He felt his chest tighten, thinking she was leaving again. But instead, she stopped just inches from the exit and turned slightly. Dylan, she said, her voice so quiet he had to lean forward to catch it. You hurt me in ways I'm not ready to talk about. And maybe you don't even know all the reasons why. So if you really mean what you're saying, you'll stop chasing the easy answers and start figuring out the hard ones. With that, she stepped outside, the door clicking shut behind her. Dylan sat there in the stillness, his mind replaying her words over and over. They weren't a rejection, but they weren't forgiveness either. They were something in between, a challenge, a test, and perhaps the smallest opening towards something neither of them could name yet. Outside, the rain had begun to fall, faint at first, then heavier, drumming against the trailer roof. Dylan stood, stepping to the doorway, watching her walk across the lot without an umbrella, her figure slowly disappearing into the mist. And as the sound of the rain filled the space around him, he knew with absolute certainty that this was far from over. Whatever it took, however long it took, he would find a way to make her see he meant every word. The set was buzzing with quiet tension as the director called for the next scene, unaware that the day was about to spiral into chaos. Dylan and Shen Yue had been trying to keep their personal turmoil hidden, but the air between them crackled with unspoken emotions. Just as the cameras began rolling, a sudden mishap on set sent a prop crashing into a piece of equipment, forcing Dylan to catch Shen Yue instinctively. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The crew held their breath as Dylan's hand lingered just a second too long on Shen Yue's arm. Their eyes locked, and the weight of everything they had kept hidden poured into that single glance. No words were spoken, but the cameras captured the raw, unscripted intensity between them, a silent confession that neither could deny. Shen Yue's chest heaved as she tried to pull away, but Dylan gently held her, as if sensing the exact moment she needed support. Off camera, whispers rippled through the crew, everyone stunned by the depth of emotion they were witnessing. Even the director paused, unsure whether to call cut or let the scene continue, feeling the electricity that had ignited on set. The moment stretched longer than it should have, a mixture of fear, longing, and unspoken desire hanging in the air. And then, just as quickly as it began, Dylan released her, stepping back with a conflicted look, leaving Shen Yue blinking through her own emotional haze. The cameras had captured it all, the vulnerability, the tension, the undeniable connection, and already rumors were starting to swirl about what had just unfolded. As the day continued, both Dylan and Shen Yue found themselves haunted by that instant, knowing that nothing on set would ever feel the same again. Their colleagues tried to act casual, but everyone sensed that the unplanned emotional scene had changed the dynamics forever. Behind the cameras, a storm of feelings brewed, and the lines between acting and reality began to blur in ways no one could have anticipated.